Welcome to my review of Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Now I can't really talk about Bloodstained without talking about Castlevania, because this really is a Castlevania game with a different name. Maybe wondering why it isn't called Castlevania. Well, Koji Igarashi worked for Konami, who did all the Castlevania games. He actually produced one of my all-time favourite games, which is Symphony of the Night. Definitely my favourite Castlevania game. That was in the original PlayStation back in 1997. But there was also some other great Castlevania games. Super Castlevania on the SNES was amazing, and there's some great Castlevania games on the old NES system as well. Castlevania 3 was an excellent one. Now Curse of the Moon really is in that 8-bit style, like the 1980s Castlevania style games. It really does look like it was made for the NES Entertainment System. Now here's a picture of the NES Entertainment System. This is a system, as I said, from the 80s. It's an 8-bit system. In the 80s, most systems had 8-bit central processing units. They would process 8 bits of data at a time. That's really why we call it sort of 8-bit style, because those systems had a certain look to them. They didn't have many colours or high resolution to work with. Now the NES was very colourful. If you look at the graphics, actually here's Castlevania 3 on the NES, so you can see what it looks like, and you can see the bright colourful graphics. And really, Curse of the Moon, that's really what they went for. They went for that 8-bit style. So this really is a retro style game. Now, Koji wanted to actually make more Castlevania style games at Konami, but Konami, they tried to modernise the Castlevania games. They did some 3D ones with mixed results. Koji, he really wanted to carry on making Castlevania games. Konami decided, I think, that there really wasn't a market for it. So Koji left Konami, and he had struggled. He struggled to find funding to make more Castlevania style games. So he turned to crowdfunding, and he did a Kickstarter. And it must have been quite gratifying for Koji because it was incredibly successful. He did his Kickstarter in 2015, and he raised over like $5.5 million. So there definitely was an appetite. I mean, I love Castlevania games, and I grew up in the 80s. So to actually get a new 8-bit style Castlevania games, it's just fantastic. And I am totally enjoying Curse of the Moon. I know a lot of people would probably prefer that it was a 16-bit style, maybe like from the 90s, that style, more that would look more like Super Castlevania or more like Symphony of the Night. But it's a stretch goal. This isn't actually the main game. Like the Kickstarter was actually for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which is actually more of a 3D looking game. It still plays like 2D, it's more of a 3D looking game. Here's a quick look at it, and as you can see, it definitely is 3D style, but plays 2D. So it's not, as of doing this review for Curse of the Moon, Ritual of the Night is not available. But because the Kickstarter was so successful, one of the stretch goals was to do an 8-bit style Castlevania game. That's where Curse of the Moon has come from. As I said, it is so much fun to play. It isn't like Symphony of the Night in as much as it's not a Metrovania style game. Now you may have heard of that phrase. It's kind of a mashup between Metroid and Castlevania, because Metroid and Castlevania, they definitely have this kind of gameplay style where as you get new abilities, you can unlock new areas in the game. And Symphony of the Night had this fantastic castle that you could explore, and as you got new abilities, you could go back to unlock new areas in it. Now, Curse of the Moon isn't really like that. Curse of the Moon is very linear. It's more like the old 8-bit style Castlevania games. There are 8 levels to Curse of the Moon, or 8 stages, and they are sort of linear. You can't really choose the order of them. They're just one after the other. But you can choose different routes within the stages. There are different doors to take you on different routes. There's actually a little skeleton guys that point you in sort of the quickest way to go. But if you haven't got the abilities to sort of access those areas, you can't do that. So there is definitely real replay value, because when you play through the game, obviously you can take different routes within each stage. Now, one of the real cool things about Curse of the Moon is they haven't just made it strictly like an 8-bit game. It definitely looks like an 8-bit game. Well, even that isn't completely correct, because it's more, I would say more like a 12-bit, because there isn't lots of colours in the graphics like the 16-bit games. Although this looks like a NES game, it really couldn't do Curse of the Moon because there's lots of parallax scrolling, it's higher resolution than NES. Although they've definitely kept the colour palette, sort of restricted the colour palette to give it that 8-bit style, it really is kind of a bit more advanced than the NES. And also they've modernised the gameplay a bit. On the old 8-bit games, when you died, you would start at the start of the level, or maybe halfway through the level. But there are lots of restart points in Curse of the Moon, so that takes away a lot of the frustration that people would often get with their older 8-bit games. Now, when you jump in this game, you can't really correct your jump. So when you jump, if you sort of jump at the wrong time and you hit a monster, monsters will knock you back, and that can lead to a bit of frustration, because when they knock you back, you can sometimes fall off the bottom of the screen and die, and then you lose one of your characters, and that can be quite frustrating. But there are different modes you can play it on. If you play it on the casual mode, I played on the veteran mode, but if you play on the casual mode, you don't get knocked back, so that can sort of alleviate that frustration. So the company that actually made this game, Inti Games, they've actually done a really good job, and they really obviously appreciate what made the old 8-bit games great, but they haven't rigidly stuck to that formula. As I say, they've modernised it. They've done quite a few sort of retro style games, and the Inti Games have really hit their stride with this Castlevania game. So having Inti on board and having Koji on board means that we have got a real quality Castlevania game here. Now, I appreciate that 8-bit style graphics isn't to everyone's taste. I grew up in the 80s, so I've got real fond memories of this style of game. And also, if you're not into Castlevania games, this isn't going to change your mind, because this is definitely hardcore Castlevania. But in the really purest sense, if you love Castlevania though, just buy this game. It's £7.99 in the UK, £7.99 pounds. In America, it is $10, and it's available on lots of systems. You can get it on Steam for the PC. It's available for the consoles as well. So it doesn't really matter what system you play it on, you still can have a great time with this. Now, one of the things Inti Games have done is to give us 4 actual characters. There's Zangetsu, who's kind of like a demon slayer, and he's like the main character, and he has a bit of a grudge against demons. He just wants to go and slaughter demons. And then you have Miriam, who is actually the main character from the Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. She's got gems encrusted in her, gives her abilities, and she has a whip, and she can jump quite high, and she can slide on the floor as well, which allows her to get to certain areas that Zangetsu can't get to. And you've got Alchemist, Alfred. He's kind of a weak character. He hasn't got a large health bar, but he's good with magic. And also you have Gabel, kind of vampire. He's got a cape, and he can turn into a bat and fly around, and again that allows you to access certain areas you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Now, you can actually befriend these characters as you go through the game. At the end of each stage, the first 3 stages, you can befriend them, and then you can switch with the actual shoulder buttons R1 and R2 on the PlayStation. You can actually switch between the characters at any time. So if one character's low on health, you can switch to another one. That really gives a nice element to the gameplay. If you are going to die on one character, you can switch to the other. When you destroy lamps, little blue bottles drop, and this builds up your super sort of special weapon so you can use it. And each character has different special weapons. Alfred has some flames that can engulf him. He also has a ice weapon that he can fire and freeze enemies and then destroy them, which is actually my favourite special weapon. You have Miriam's special weapons. She has some throwing knives. She has like a sickle that actually sort of a boomerangs back and comes back. And of course Gabel, I've already mentioned, he can turn into a bat. And Zangetsu has like a whip you don't actually have to befriend these characters, you can actually kill them. And when you kill them, you actually can acquire new abilities. There's an aerial dash and slash and a double jump you can acquire. And if you choose to do that, then you get different endings. There are different endings. You can also just ignore the allies altogether, just ignore them and just play through as Zangetsu without any extra abilities. That's probably the toughest ending to get to. There's also a boss mode as well, like a boss rush mode that you can unlock once you've unlocked the other endings as well. Now, one thing I would say is definitely just play through the game first of all and befriend everybody, do that ending first, and then you'll unlock the nightmare mode. The nightmare mode is definitely worth playing through. I won't spoil anything for you, but just to say, definitely play through the nightmare mode, and there's definitely more to discover. So I definitely think this game is well worth, as I say, $7.99 in the UK, totally worth the price. Now, I don't actually believe that the NES could actually cope with Curse of the Moon in its current form. Definitely have to downgrade it to actually get it running on the NES. Cool if that actually happened, because then I could actually put it on a cart. But of course then I'd have to reprogram the whole game, because the NES is, you know, an old system. It can't really handle sort of compiled C code, so they'd have to write it in assembly language. So that's really not going to happen, but I couldn't resist doing a mock-up of what the Curse of the Moon NES cartridge may have looked like. Now, the bosses in this game are absolutely fantastic. There's lots of cool boss mechanics. I particularly like the lady in the bath, and she's got these umbrellas. That's a really cool boss. Okay, so this is definitely worth buying, and I just had so much fun with it. Thank you for watching this review. I hope it's been helpful, informative for you, and please give me a thumbs up if you like the review. It really helps me out. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.